Of course, the CDC initially, they talked and consulted with experts, and they came up with the preferred priority groups for who's going to get the vaccines first. Ultimately, it's actually up to the states to determine how they are going to distribute the doses and in what order and to who and when. So we're starting to see certain states breaking from that federal guidance. And that's what it was. It was guidance. It wasn't instructions necessarily. So for instance, Texas is actually going to put people who are 65 and older, as well as people with certain medical conditions, ahead of essential workers like grocery store, police, firefighters. Massachusetts is going to include incarcerated people and correctional officers in their first round of priorities. That was not in the CDC's first priority tier. So, Keith, my question for you is: are states taking a different strategy than the CDC with their priority group guidance?
Some are. Most states are generally going along with the CDC guidelines. A Kaiser Family Foundation report from just last week found that 45 states are broadly following the guidelines for phase 1A. And phase 1A was the CDC. If you remember, the CDC kind of segmented the rollout of vaccines into phases, and phase 1A included healthcare workers and long-term care residents. And so 45 states are broadly following those guidelines for phase 1A. You mentioned a few exceptions, Texas, Massachusetts, and there are some others. And then some states are actually moving long-term care residents to phase 1B instead of phase 1A. So you're seeing a little bit of variation, but generally most states are going along with what the CDC has recommended. Now, the real question will be, as we get into later phases and sub-phases, a lot of the states are still working out how they're going to roll out vaccines in these later phases. So it could be that we could see more departures from the CDC guidelines going forward. But for right now, most states are going along with it. And I think we'll probably see, at least from a general perspective, the CDC guidelines adhered to by most states.
Yeah, it's interesting though to see these deviations. I think Florida has said that they are probably going to prioritize older folks ahead of essential workers. You look at the makeup of Florida, they have so many older folks. And so, the governors, they know their states. And so it's interesting. I'm just kind of curious about the strategy here. There's, one tack that says you protect the most vulnerable populations first, right? People who are older, people who have conditions. On the other hand, the essential workers, they're the ones who are out in the world. And so vaccinating them first could have more of an impact on the spread and the transmission. Do you have any? I don't really have a question for you. I'm just
Well,
wondering if you have
I mean,
thoughts.
I totally agree with you. And I think if it just came down to pure logic would say give the vaccine to those where it's going to be most effective in preventing spread. I mean, that would be pure logic. But this isn't a purely logical question. This is a political question in many of these states. And so there are political and some other just compassionate type things to take into account. And so I think you're going to see different states do different things because they're different political considerations.